Hey guys, Dilby here. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about compression. It's a crazy topic, but it's kind of a fundamental tool in audio production. This is something that I had struggled to understand for years. It's kind of complicated, but kind of simple, and I think there's a lot of people out there that actually don't really understand it. I've seen some hilarious videos with like pro producers who are talking about putting an SSL this or a Neve that on every channel and doing this and doing that. In the end, what they're basically doing is just turning up the volume. You know, you hear people talking about how warm things sound, how analog they sound, how punchy, how this, how that. Just, it's a lot and it's really confusing. So today what I'm going to do is really try and simplify it. I'm going to show you the types of compression that I use, the way I use them, and how you can implement them in a really practical way for your projects. Just quickly, if you like the track that's playing, it's a new one of mine on Deep Palma. It's called Barricade and it's out now. There's a link in the description to Beatport and Spotify. Your support is much appreciated. Another way you can support the channel is through Patreon. Over on Patreon, you can download all of the projects for the tutorial videos that I produce. And we've also got a fantastic Discord community where you can get to know other producers, interact, share your tips, get feedback on your music, all sorts of good stuff. But for now, let's just jump into Ableton and do some compression. Alright, so here we are inside Ableton, and this is a little project that I've set up to demonstrate some compression. We're going to try and keep this as simple as possible, and I'm going to show you the practical ways about how I use compression. For anyone who's a bit more advanced, please keep in mind that I'm trying to simplify this for people who don't understand it. This is a confusing subject. I'm just trying to cut through the complicated stuff and make a practical way for people to be able to use compression in their projects. Yo, excuse the interruption, but I had to let you know that my new course has just dropped with Fader Pro. Deep House Masterclass, track from scratch, taking you through every aspect of producing a track, melody, bass line, writing drums, arranging, mixing, all of that stuff. And they've given me a discount code exclusive for my YouTube channel, Dilby Deep. That's going to get you 20% off. There's a link in the description. Hope you enjoy it. I'm super proud of this course. Let's go. Now back to the compressors. So first of all, what I'm going to do is define what compression is, what it's doing. Basically, a compressor is designed to reduce the dynamic range of a signal. What this means is that the loud parts get quieter, the quiet parts get louder. Let's define the components of a compressor. So the first and one of the most important aspects of a compressor is the threshold. What this means is that when the signal coming into the compressor goes over a certain level, the compressor will start to act, thereby reducing the signal. The amount that the compressor reacts to this signal going over the threshold is dictated by another control called ratio. The next important control on a compressor is gain, or makeup gain, or output. On different devices it may be called different things, but this is basically the part of the compressor that raises up the volume of the lower part of your signal. Some compressors will also have an auto gain function, which means that the compressor automatically checks how much it's reducing the signal by and compensates on the output. Auto gain may also be called a few different things. For example, on the Ableton compressor, this is called makeup. The next two controls are attack and release. Attack dictates how quickly the compressor responds after the signal goes over the threshold. The release dictates how long the compressor takes to let go of that gain reduction after the signal again goes above the threshold. Alright, so now that we've established those fundamental parts of a compressor, let's get in and look at some practical examples. So the first thing I've got here is a vocal. Got it on 2 channels so we can compare with and without compression. This is what the dry signal sounds like.
You wanna dance? Come on. If you feel like you wanna move, come on.
So what I've done is gone through here. The signal's already been processed a little bit, but I've gone through and reduced the gain in some parts of the vocal take. And this is going to be pretty common for any vocal take. So what we're using here is the Ableton compressor. You could also use the glue compressor, but the Ableton compressor is the kind of standard compressor, is really good for explaining this stuff. So let's set the ratio to 1 to 1. So we can see here in the display what's actually happening to the signal.
Dance! Come on!
You can see the waveform coming through here, and this blue line is our threshold, and nothing is going above the threshold. So let's reduce the threshold.
Dance! Come on! Dance! Come on!
Okay, so we haven't got any compression happening because we haven't got any ratio set. So let's turn that up to about 3 to 1.
Dance! Come on!
and we can see this yellow line indicating the gain reduction that's happening. Now we don't have any output, so this gain is coming down, but it's not being compensated for. So we can see this on this oscillos megascope here. So on the top we've got the dry signal, and on the bottom we've got the wet signal, or the compressed signal.
Feel like you wanna dance. Come on. Feel like you wanna dance.
So you can see as I turn that ratio knob up and bring the threshold down, let's just leave the ratio set at 3:1. This is getting flatter, so we're bringing down the loud parts.
Feel like you wanna dance.
Now we can use the output gain to bring it back to the original volume.
Feel like you wanna dance. Come on. If you feel like you want to move.
So what we can basically see there is that the signal is getting less dynamic. We are decreasing the dynamic range. So when we play this over the top of a track, like most vocals will be used, it's going to sound more consistent. So let's play it over the top of this.
Feel like you want to dance. Come on.
So you can hear that vocal is jumping out and then disappearing and then jumping out. So with the compressed signal,
feel like you want to dance. Come on.
It's more consistent. It's not jumping out so much, but it's also not disappearing. So let's just turn on the automatic makeup gain, and then we'll try to set the attack and release. So let's set the attack. Now we don't want it to be too fast. We don't want it to be clamping down straight away because it's going to sound too aggressive, I think.
Feel like you want to dance. Come on.
So we still want some of that sibilance, some of that articulation at the start of the vocal.
Feel like you want to dance. Come on.
Okay, now let's add some release.
Feel like you want to dance. Come on.
Release, you're kind of trying to do it by ear to hear what sounds natural with the vocal. This may take some practice. You can also use the auto release on this compressor.
Feel like you want to dance. Come on. Feel like you want to dance. Feel like you want to dance. Come on. Feel like you want to dance.
So to me that sounds like it's getting about right. Let's have a listen before.
Feel like you want to dance. Come on. Feel like you want to dance. Come on.
Much more consistent. So that's basically how I use a compressor. I mainly use it on vocals. I will sometimes use it on other elements very gently to control the dynamics. When I'm using it on other elements like synths, I'll generally use a glue compressor with a ratio with an attack of 3, a release of 0.2, a ratio of 4, and I'm just going to basically bring the threshold down until I see a bit of gain reduction.
Feel like you want to dance. Come on. Feel like you want to dance.
So it's not quite as aggressive as I was doing on the compressor here. I generally do it quite gently with the glue compressor, but as I said, I use it for different types of elements. So the next thing we're going to look at is a transient shaper. It is technically not a compressor, but I categorize it in the same kind of family of devices. What I normally use a transient shaper for is controlling the dynamics of drum loops, but you could also use it on a particularly spiky synth loop or vocal, but basically it's for controlling transients. This is a free one from Kilohertz. You can get all sorts of transient shapers, but this Kilohertz bundle of free plugins is really good. Ableton Live doesn't have a dedicated transient shaper. It has transient shapers as components of different devices, but for this case we're going to use the Kilohertz one. So let's have a look at our loop. Okay. So the scenario here is that the drum loop is too transient. It's basically the transients are becoming a bit piercing as we're trying to mix it. So we're going to try and use the transient shaper to control them. So I'll bring down the attack so we can see what's happening. So you can hear that's actually lowering the signal quite a bit, because basically the attack is happening here, and then as we decrease the attack amount, it's kind of affecting more and more of the signal. So what I'm going to do is use this utility to compensate a bit. We can, of course, always go the other way if we had a drum loop that we felt was too dull. Now the next control is the sustain, and what this is going to basically do is turn up the sustain portion of the sound. So in this case, what we might want to do with the drum loop is bring down the attack a little bit. Bring up the sustain slightly. So if you compare this to the last example with the compressor, it's doing a similar thing. We're reducing the dynamics by bringing down the transient and bringing up the sustain, but in kind of a simplified way. So there, I've kind of gain matched them, and we can listen to before. Okay, so let's bring down the dynamics a little bit more, bring down the attack a little bit more. So that's a bit more controlled, but we're bringing up the body to fit it into our fake mix. That's how a transient shaper works. The next type of compressor that we're going to look at is a limiter. Now, I'm using the Waves L2 here for a couple of reasons. One, it's super simple. I've got the release set on auto. Our limiter will have similar controls to a regular compressor, but oftentimes it's simplified. And in this case, it's very simple. The Ableton one is also very simple, but Ableton, you really need to update your limiter. It may work fine, but the interface is pretty bad. Okay, so what we've got here is the pre-master of the track that you heard in the intro, my new track Barricade, out on De Palma. Link in the description if you want to go and grab a copy. But anyway, here we go. So with the limiter, what we're going to be doing is really controlling the dynamics and getting the track ready for distribution. So what we're going to try and do is control these like spiky bits here, right? We're trying to bring the signal to be a lot more consistent. And you'll hear that once I start adding some limiting. Okay, so another reason why I chose this is that if we add the threshold, if we just pull the threshold down, it's basically increasing the volume until it starts to attenuate the signal, gain reduction. I know it's confusing. Every single device has different names for the same things, right? But that's just the way it is. So we've got our pre-masters coming through here. Now if I start to pull the threshold down, you'll notice that it's going to get quite a lot louder. And we haven't even started getting any attenuation yet. But why this limiter is so good for demonstration purposes is we can grab this knob here where we bring down the output at the same rate as we are increasing the input or bringing down the threshold, whichever way you want to look at it. Basically, we're going to start to reduce the signal, attenuate the signal, without adding extra volume. So let's have a look at this. So we can see here that those dynamics, those spiky parts of the signal are starting to disappear. We're getting this kind of flattened out look, and this looks more like a mastered track. If you drag a track that you purchased from Beatport into Ableton, it's going to start to look like this. So let's bring back a little bit of the output to gain compensate. I've done this to the extreme. We're really chopping away all of the transients, so let's bring it back a little bit. We're looking here to get about maybe 3 dB of gain reduction. So now we've got a roughly the same level signal for both of them, but let's have a listen to before. So after, it sounds a lot fuller. Everything sounds kind of more glued together. It starts to sound punchier. While the volume isn't increased, it sounds louder. The perceived loudness has increased. And this is one of the main tasks of a mastering engineer, is to do this well. Especially in 2023, it's to bring those dynamics down in a way that still sounds good to the listener. So when you're doing this, when you're limiting, do it gently, do it with restraint, and you're just trying to get it a bit closer to a professionally mastered track. Other things I would use for a limiter is sometimes on vocals when I'm trying to get a really kind of squashed, poppy kind of vocal, or on a bass line or a synth where I want like a really consistent volume. Generally an element that is going to be quite loud in the mix, so it's going to have a bigger impact on the overall signal if it has too many dynamics. So that's a quick and dirty explanation of the different types of compression and how I use them. If you've got any questions, then let me know in the comments. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it was helpful, and hopefully it simplified compression a little bit for some of you. If you're a more advanced producer, you're probably tearing your hair out a bit at some of the simplifications I was doing. Feel free to roast me in the comments, whatever. And if you're looking for something to watch next, then check out this video. I think you're going to like it. That's it from me today. We'll catch you next time. Peace.